I'm Savannah Blackwood, 29, and my perfectly controlled life imploded during our monthly family dinner when my father set down his fork and said, "You have 2 days to get your stuff out of this house." My crime dating my step-cousin Eliza's ex-fiancé Ryan. I never imagined my family would choose blood loyalty over understanding, but as my mother's tears fell and Eliza's victorious smirk grew, I realized this betrayal would permanently alter our family's foundations. Before I continue this story about how my family's perception of loyalty completely shattered my world, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy family drama with unexpected twists. Trust me, what happened after I was kicked out will shock you, and you'll want to stick around to see how karma eventually served the ultimate family revenge. Growing up, I was the quintessential golden child of the Blackwood family. My parents, Robert and Catherine Blackwood, never missed an opportunity to showcase my achievements. Straight A's throughout school, valedictorian at my high school graduation, full scholarship to Yale, and graduated top of my class from law school. By 26, I was already making six figures at a prestigious law firm in Boston, where coincidentally my father had several connections. The perfect trajectory for the perfect daughter. Our family home in Wellesley, Massachusetts, was a grand colonial with 5 bedrooms, which meant I could continue living at home while saving for my own place without feeling cramped. My parents encouraged this arrangement. Why waste money on rent when they had plenty of space? Besides, I was their pride and joy, and they liked having me around. Things changed when I was 12 and my uncle Thomas remarried after his divorce. His new wife, Vanessa, came with a daughter, Eliza, who was just a year younger than me. Suddenly, I wasn't the only child in the extended family spotlight. Eliza was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, rebellious, artistic, and effortlessly charming. While I was studying for exams, she was sneaking out to concerts. When I was applying to internships, she was backpacking through Europe, finding herself. Despite our differences, I made efforts to welcome Eliza into the family. I helped her with homework, invited her to my activities, tried to include her in family traditions. But there was always something off about our relationship, a strange competitiveness I couldn't quite put my finger on. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me with an expression that seemed almost like resentment. As we grew older, the contrast between us only became more pronounced. I followed the rules, built a stable career, and maintained a spotless reputation. Eliza bounced between jobs, relationships, and apartments, always with some dramatic story about why things fell apart. Yet somehow the family rallied around her each time, offering financial support, emotional comfort, and endless second chances. "She's just finding her way," my father would say, writing another check to cover Eliza's rent after she quit another job. The same father who had lectured me for hours when I got a B+ in a college calculus class. I never complained, not once. I smiled at family gatherings as relatives fawned over Eliza's latest artistic venture or gushed about how authentic she was. I congratulated her when she announced her engagement to Ryan Matthews, a successful architect she'd met at a gallery opening. I even agreed to help plan their wedding, spending hours listening to her change her mind about venues, flowers, and dresses, while I should have been preparing for an important case. The first time I met Ryan was at their engagement dinner. He seemed intelligent, driven, and oddly out of place in Eliza's bohemian world. We exchanged pleasantries, discussed his recent architectural project downtown, and moved on to other conversations. Nothing special, nothing noteworthy, just my step-cousin's fiancé, another person orbiting our complicated family dynamic. What I didn't admit to anyone, barely even to myself, was the growing resentment I felt beneath my perfect facade. The bitterness that built with each family dinner where my major case win got a polite nod while Eliza's new photography hobby received rapturous attention. The frustration of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the boring one. Savannah always has everything together, they'd say, not realizing that being put on a pedestal meant I had much further to fall. I remember watching Eliza and Ryan together at family gatherings, noticing how he seemed to rein in his opinions around her, how his smile sometimes didn't reach his eyes when she interrupted his stories. Small things, insignificant things. Things I had no business noticing about my step-cousin's fiancé. Then came the dramatic breakup just 3 months before their wedding. Eliza came home in tears, claiming Ryan had betrayed her trust, though she was conspicuously vague about the details. The family mobilized like an army closing ranks around her. My father offered to handle the cancellations. My mother took her shopping to heal. I was assigned the task of collecting Eliza's things from Ryan's apartment. Looking back, I wonder if that was the moment everything changed. When I knocked on Ryan's door box in hand and saw not the villain from Eliza's story, but a man who looked as exhausted and misunderstood as I sometimes felt. 6 months after Eliza and Ryan's breakup, I was rushing to a morning court hearing when I literally crashed into someone at my regular coffee shop. Hot Americano splashed across both our shirts, and I looked up to see Ryan Matthews, his blue eyes widening in recognition. Savannah Blackwood. He seemed genuinely pleased to see me, despite the coffee stains spreading across his white button-down. "I'm so sorry about that," I said, grabbing napkins from the counter. "Let me buy you another coffee at least." "Only if you'll join me," he countered. "I've just had a client cancel, so I have a rare free hour." I should have politely declined. I had a perfectly reasonable excuse, my court hearing. But instead, I heard myself saying, "My hearing got pushed to tomorrow. I'd love to catch up." That first conversation lasted 2 hours. We discussed everything except Eliza, our careers books we'd read recently, places we wanted to travel. I discovered he had a dry wit that made me laugh genuinely for what felt like the first time in months. He listened to my opinions without interrupting. When he disagreed, he did so thoughtfully rather than dismissively. As we were leaving, he hesitated. "I know this is probably inappropriate given everything, but would you want to grab dinner sometime?" The proper response would have been an immediate no. Instead, I heard myself say, "We probably shouldn't. Not no, just shouldn't." He caught the distinction immediately. "Shouldn't isn't the same as won't," he said with a small smile. "I'll text you." And thus began 6 months of secrecy that consumed my thoughts every waking moment. We met at restaurants in neighboring towns. We saw movies in theaters where no family friends would go. We spent weekends at a small cottage he rented on Cape Cod, always arriving separately, always checking twice before holding hands in public. "I don't understand why we can't just tell your family," Ryan said one evening, as we sat on the cottage's small deck watching the sunset. "Eliza and I have been over for almost a year. We're both adults." I sighed, having had this conversation multiple times already. "You don't understand how my family works. Eliza is still playing the heartbroken victim. Last Sunday dinner, she cried when my mom accidentally mentioned architecture. They all patted her hand and glared at my mother as if she deliberately upset Eliza. "That's ridiculous," Ryan said. Our relationship had been failing for months before the breakup, and she's the one who I held up my hand stopping him. "I know. You've told me." But that's not the story she told them, and they believe her version. The truth about their breakup, which Ryan had reluctantly shared, was far different from Eliza's victim narrative. She had been caught messaging an ex-boyfriend, making plans to meet up while Ryan was scheduled to be out of town. When confronted, instead of apologizing, she'd turned it around on him, accusing him of being controlling and stifling her free spirit. The final straw came when she suggested they should have an open relationship, but only on her side. I just don't think healthy relationships should have to be secret. Ryan persisted, taking my hand. I'm falling in love with you, Savannah. I don't want to hide that. His words sent both thrill and panic through me. I was falling for him too. His steadiness, his ambition, his way of truly seeing me, rather than the perfect daughter persona I'd maintained for years. But going public would mean confronting my family's tangled loyalties and the unspoken hierarchy that had shaped our dynamic for years. Just a little longer, I promised, squeezing his hand. Let me find the right time to break it to them. But the right time never seemed to materialize. Every family dinner featured some mention of poor Eliza and how she was still healing. Any mention of Ryan was met with scowls and subject changes. The longer our relationship continued, the higher the stakes became, and the harder it was to imagine confessing. The close calls were becoming more frequent too. My mother almost caught us when she unexpectedly stopped by my office for lunch, and Ryan was just leaving after dropping off takeout. My father nearly spotted us at a restaurant in Cambridge. Ryan's colleagues saw us at the Cape and mentioned it to someone who knew Eliza's friend. The web of secrecy was pulling tighter, threatening to strangle what we were building together. Each close call left me anxious for days, checking my phone constantly for the dreaded family confrontation. Ryan grew increasingly frustrated with the subterfuge. "This isn't sustainable," he said during one of our arguments. "I want a normal relationship. I want to post pictures of us online. I want to bring you as my date to my firm's holiday party. I want to go to dinner with our friends without checking the guest list 3 times for connections to your family." I know, I said, pacing his living room, but you don't understand what I'd be risking. My entire family would turn against me. If they would turn against you for being happy, what does that say about them? About the conditional nature of their love, Ryan challenged. And what does continuing this secrecy say about how much you trust what we have? His words hit me like a physical blow. Was I protecting my family relationships, or was I simply afraid to lose the identity I'd built as the perfect daughter? Was I willing to sacrifice a chance at genuine happiness to maintain an increasingly fragile facade? 2 more weeks, I said finally, after Eliza's art show opening. I'll tell them then when everyone's had a good evening and is feeling positive. Ryan nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He'd heard similar promises before. What neither of us knew was that we wouldn't have those 2 weeks. The decision would be taken out of my hands in the most catastrophic way possible. The annual Blackwood Spring Garden Party was in full swing when my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Thinking of you. Wish I could be there with you openly." I smiled quickly, typing a response before returning my phone to my purse. The garden was filled with family and close friends, enjoying the perfect Mayweather crystal glasses of champagne, catching the late afternoon sunlight. My mother's prized roses were in full bloom, providing a picturesque backdrop for what would become the beginning of the end. Eliza arrived fashionably late as usual, drawing attention in a flowing bohemian dress. She air-kissed relatives, accepted compliments on her recent art show, and eventually made her way to where I stood, chatting with an elderly aunt. "Savannah, darling," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I've been looking for you. My phone died, and I need to check if the gallery sent an email about those potential buyers. Can I borrow yours for a sec?" Without thinking, I handed her my unlocked phone. "Sure. I'll go grab us some drinks while you check." I was at the drink table when I heard the gasp. Turning, I saw Eliza staring at my phone, her face a mask of shock that was quickly morphing into something darker. Our eyes met across the garden, and in that moment, I knew exactly what had happened. She'd seen my texts with Ryan. The next few minutes unfolded in slow motion. Eliza's voice unnaturally loud, cutting through the pleasant chatter. "You've been seeing Ryan behind my back." Heads turned. Conversations stopped. My mother's hand flew to her heart. Eliza, please, I said, moving toward her. It's not what you think. It's been almost a year since you broke up. Not what I think, she shrieked, waving my phone. These messages go back 6 months. You've been sneaking around with him while sitting right next to me at family dinners, pretending to support me through our breakup. My father stepped forward, his face thunderous. Savannah, what is she talking about? Words failed me. How could I explain that what Ryan and I had was real, not some tawdry betrayal? How could I make them understand that I'd hidden it precisely because I knew they would react exactly as they were reacting now? I think my father said, coldly, when I couldn't immediately respond that this conversation should continue inside. Now, the party disintegrated as whispers spread. Family friends made awkward excuses to leave. My mother, ashen-faced, apologized to guests while shooting me, looks of profound disappointment. Eliza, now sobbing dramatically, was surrounded by sympathetic relatives. Inside my father's study, the interrogation began. Every detail of my relationship with Ryan was demanded and dissected. Every defense I offered was countered with accusations of disloyalty and deceit. Of all people, Savannah, my mother said, her voice breaking. You were always the one we could count on to do the right thing. Dating Ryan is not wrong, I insisted, finding my voice at last. Eliza cheated on him. She's the one who ended their relationship, not the other way around. Eliza gasped. That's a lie. How dare you try to smear my name to justify your betrayal? We waited 6 months after your breakup. I continued, ignoring her outburst. There's no rule that says he's off limits forever. He was going to be part of this family, my father thundered. You don't date family, even ex-family. He was never actually family, I countered. They weren't married. And even if they had been, they're not blood relatives of mine. Eliza isn't even my blood cousin. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a tactical error. My father's face hardened into a mask I'd never seen before. So that's how you see it. Eliza isn't real family to you after all these years. That's not what I meant. I think it's exactly what you meant. My mother interjected, her usual warmth completely gone. You've been calculating this, justifying it to yourself with technicalities, while lying to our faces for months. The conversation spiraled further, with Eliza adding perfect emotional daggers at precisely the right moments. Tears when effective, righteous anger when tears weren't enough. I watched her performance with a detached sort of admiration. She was good, better than I'd realized. Sunday dinner the following week was a frozen affair. I attended out of a desperate hope that tempers would have cooled, that reason might prevail. Instead, halfway through the silent meal, my father set down his fork with deliberate calm. Your mother and I have been discussing the situation. He began, not meeting my eyes. We think it would be best if you moved out. You have 2 days to get your things in order. The world seemed to stop. You're kicking me out. Over this, actions have consequences, Savannah, my mother said quietly. You've betrayed this family's trust. Broken our hearts. But 2 days, my father repeated. We'll help you find an apartment if needed, but we think some distance would be appropriate. I looked around the table at the family I thought I knew. My father's implacable expression, my mother's tearful avoidance, Uncle Thomas's uncomfortable silence, Aunt Vanessa's poorly concealed satisfaction, and Eliza's perfect mixture of victim and victor. Not one of them was willing to hear my side or consider that perhaps the situation wasn't as black and white as they wanted to believe. I stood, napkin falling forgotten to the floor. I'll be out by tomorrow afternoon, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Don't trouble yourselves with helping me find a place. I walked out of that dining room with my head high, but once in my bedroom, I collapsed onto my bed, sobs wrenching from somewhere deep inside me. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my place in it, had been upended. The golden child status that I had both cherished and resented had been revoked in an instant. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. How did it go? I stared at the screen through my tears, typing and retyping my response. How could I possibly condense what had just happened into a text message? Finally, I simply wrote, "They kicked me out. I need a place to stay." His response was immediate. "Come to me. I'll be waiting." As I packed my life into suitcases and boxes, I cycled through shock, grief, anger, and finally a strange sort of relief. The perfect daughter facade had cracked completely, and for the first time in my life, I didn't have to maintain it anymore. I was free, terrifyingly, devastatingly free. The guest bedroom in Ryan's apartment became my new reality. My clothes hung in an unfamiliar closet, my toiletries arranged in a bathroom that still felt like someone else's, my law books stacked neatly on a desk by a window overlooking a neighborhood I was still learning to navigate. "Stay as long as you need," Ryan had said when he helped carry in my hastily packed belongings. "We'll figure this out together." His kindness should have been a comfort, but in those first weeks, it felt almost like a burden, another person whose expectations I now had to worry about. Our relationship thrust suddenly into the open after months of secrecy felt raw and vulnerable under the harsh light of day. "You can't blame me for this," Ryan said during one of our arguments, his frustration evident. "I wanted to tell them months ago. You're the one who insisted on keeping everything hidden." "I'm not blaming you," I said, though perhaps I was. "I just need some space to process everything that's happened." "Space?" He ran a hand through his hair. "You're living in my apartment, Savannah. How much more space can I give you while still being supportive?" The truth was, I didn't know what I needed. The identity I'd built over 29 years had been constructed around being the perfect Blackwood daughter. Without that foundation, I felt unmoored adrift in a sea of uncertainty about who I actually was. The professional fallout came swiftly. I arrived at work the Monday after moving out to find my boss, Patricia, waiting in my office with an unusually grave expression. "The Wilson case is being reassigned," she said without preamble. I stared at her in confusion. "What? Why? I've been leading that case for months. We're 3 weeks from trial." The client requested the change. Her discomfort was evident. Apparently, Robert Blackwood had a conversation with them over the weekend. My father, using his connections to undermine my career. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. "Is there anything else I should know about?" I asked, struggling to maintain my professional composure. Patricia hesitated. "Your performance review has been moved up. And the partnership track discussions, there's been some reconsideration about timing." Translation: my career advancement was now in jeopardy. 5 years of 60-hour weeks, sacrificed weekends, flawless case management, all potentially meaningless because my father had decided to punish me for my personal choices. The social media storm hit next. Eliza posted a carefully worded status update that never mentioned me by name, but made it clear to anyone who knew our family that she had been betrayed by someone close to her. The comments section filled with sympathetic responses and vague denunciations of people who don't understand loyalty. Friends from college texted to ask what was happening. Colleagues gave me curious glances in the hallways. Even my favorite barista seemed to be watching me with new interest when I ordered my usual Americano. I retreated from all social platforms, unable to bear watching my reputation unravel in real time. My phone, once constantly buzzing with family group chats and check-ins from my parents, fell eerily silent, except for messages from Ryan and a handful of friends who had reached out to offer support. Depression settled over me like a heavy blanket. I went to work, performed adequately, came home to Ryan's apartment, and went through the motions of eating, sleeping, existing. I lost weight. My skin broke out. Dark circles appeared under my eyes, and refused to leave regardless of how much concealer I applied. Ryan tried his best to pull me out of the darkness. He cooked my favorite meals, suggested weekend trips to distract me, held me when I cried. But there was a growing distance between us that neither of us knew how to bridge. What had begun in secret excitement now felt tainted by the catastrophic consequences. Maybe we should take a break, I suggested one night staring at my untouched dinner, just until things settled down. The hurt in his eyes was immediate. Is that what you want, or what you think your family wants? I don't know anymore. The admission felt like a surrender. I don't know what I want, who I am, what I'm doing. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about my family, has been turned upside down. Ryan reached across the table, taking my hand. Then don't make any decisions right now. Give yourself time to figure it out. But don't push away the people who actually care about you just because you're hurting. His words resonated more than I wanted to admit. Was I sabotaging the one genuine relationship I had left because I was afraid of more pain? Or because some part of me still hoped that if I ended things with Ryan, my family might forgive me? 3 weeks into my exile, I finally gathered the courage to retrieve the rest of my belongings from my parents' house. I deliberately chose a Tuesday afternoon when I knew they would be at work, using the key they hadn't yet asked me to return. The house felt eerily unchanged, as if my absence had made no impact on its perfect order. In my bedroom, now stripped of the personal touches that had made it mine, I began packing the remaining books, winter clothes, and mementos I hadn't taken in my hasty departure. At the back of my closet, I found a box of childhood keepsakes I'd forgotten about: report cards, school art projects, birthday cards from relatives. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, I sifted through these artifacts of a happier time, allowing myself a moment of nostalgia before it all went into packing boxes. At the bottom of the box, beneath a folder of old photographs, I discovered a stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon. They were addressed to my father in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting, dated from about 20 years ago. I hesitated, aware that reading someone else's correspondence crossed a line. But given everything that had happened, my respect for family boundaries had significantly diminished. I untied the ribbon and began to read. The first few letters were fairly mundane family updates, but in the fourth letter, dated September 1996, a passage caught my attention. "Robert, you must end this destructive situation before Catherine finds out. Think of your daughter, if not your marriage. Vanessa is Thomas's wife now, regardless of your history with her. What happened in the past must stay there for all our sakes." I froze, rereading the paragraph multiple times to ensure I hadn't misunderstood. Vanessa, Eliza's mother, my uncle's wife, had some sort of history with my father. A history my grandmother had found concerning enough to write letters, warning him to stay away. Hands shaking, I continued through the remaining Maber letters. They contained veiled references to poor choices, responsibility to your family, and maintaining appearances. Nothing explicitly spelled out what had happened, but the implication was clear. There had been some impropriety between my father and Aunt Vanessa, possibly an affair. The final letter in the stack delivered the most shocking revelation. "I understand your distress at Thomas and Vanessa's engagement, but you must accept that she has made her choice. Your brief relationship with her ended years ago, and Catherine has been nothing but a devoted wife. Let Thomas have this happiness. He suspects nothing of your past with Vanessa, and it must remain that way. For Savannah's sake, if nothing else, you must move forward and commit fully to the family you have created, not pine for what might have been." My mind raced, connecting dots I'd never noticed before. My father and Aunt Vanessa's strained politeness at family gatherings. My mother's occasional tight-lipped expressions when Vanessa dominated conversations. The way my grandmother always seated them at opposite ends of the table at holiday dinners. Most importantly, the hypocritical outrage my father had displayed over my relationship with Ryan. He had potentially had an affair with his own brother's wife, yet he had the audacity to disown me for dating my step-cousin's ex-fiancé. I carefully photographed each letter, ensuring I had evidence of what I'd discovered, then returned them exactly as I'd found them. As I finished packing my remaining belongings, a new emotion began to replace my depression, righteous anger. On my way out, I noticed a framed family photo from last Christmas that included Eliza, my parents, Uncle Thomas, and Aunt Vanessa. I studied their faces with new understanding, wondering what other secrets lurked beneath the perfect family facade. I'm sure you're on the edge of your seat, wondering what I did with this shocking information about my father's past with Aunt Vanessa. Before I continue with what happened next, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed your perspective on everything? Drop a comment below. And if you're enjoying this family drama roller coaster, please hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on more real-life stories like this one. Now let me tell you what I did with this explosive discovery. The revelation about my father and Aunt Vanessa consumed my thoughts. I needed confirmation before proceeding with any sort of confrontation. My grandmother Eleanor Blackwood had written those letters, and if anyone could verify their contents, it would be her. My grandmother had always been somewhat of an outlier in the family, pragmatic, straightforward, and notoriously difficult to impress. She lived alone in a modest house in Brookline, maintaining her independence at 83 with stubborn determination. Unlike my parents, she hadn't cut contact after the Ryan incident, though her single text message, "Families are complicated, dear. This too shall pass," hadn't exactly been the wholehearted support I'd hoped for. I called ahead before visiting, not mentioning the real reason for my sudden desire to see her. "Savannah," she said when she opened the door, her sharp eyes taking in my appearance with concern. "You've lost weight." "It's been a difficult few weeks," I admitted, as she ushered me into her living room, the familiar scent of Earl Grey tea and old books wrapping around me like a comforting blanket. "So I've heard," she replied dryly. "Your father called to inform me of your betrayal." I told him he was being dramatic. A surprised laugh escaped me, the first genuine laugh in weeks. "You did. I've lived too long to get worked up over who's dating whom." She settled into her favorite armchair, gesturing for me to sit opposite her. "Though I must say keeping it secret for months wasn't your wisest decision." "That's partly why I'm here," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I found some letters while I was collecting my things from the house. Letters you wrote to Dad about 20 years ago." The change in her expression was subtle but unmistakable, a slight narrowing of the eyes, a tightening around the mouth. "I see. They mentioned something about Dad and Aunt Vanessa having a history." I watched her face closely. Was there an affair? My grandmother sighed deeply, removing her reading glasses and placing them carefully on the side table. I was hoping that particular chapter would remain buried. "So it's true," my heart pounded. "Not exactly an affair, but close enough." She looked past me, seemingly lost in memories. "Your father and Vanessa dated seriously in college." "They were engaged briefly, actually." "Engaged?" I echoed, stunned. This was more than I'd expected. "Yes, before he met your mother. They broke it off when Robert went to law school. Vanessa wasn't interested in being a lawyer's wife, too conventional for her artistic temperament." The irony wasn't lost on me. Eliza had clearly inherited her mother's flair for drama. They went their separate ways. Your father met Catherine, they married, had you. Everything seemed settled. But then Thomas brought Vanessa to a family dinner 15 years after she and Robert had broken up. Pure coincidence. Thomas had no idea about their past. The attraction between them rekindled almost immediately. She shook her head disapprovingly. "Your father was in a midlife crisis of sorts, feeling trapped by the very life he'd chosen. Vanessa represented the road not taken." "Did they have an affair?" I asked again, needing clarity. "Not physically, as far as I know. But emotionally, absolutely. Secret phone calls, clandestine meetings for coffee, long walks where they discussed the life they might have had together. Grandmother's mouth set in a grim line. Your mother suspected something, though. She never knew exactly what. Those were dark months for your parents' marriage. What happened? I intervened. Hence the letters. I reminded Robert of his responsibilities of what he stood to lose. Eventually, he recommitted to your mother, and Vanessa married Thomas. She looked at me directly. But the tension has always remained simmering beneath the surface. Your father overcompensates with Thomas out of guilt. And Vanessa? Well, Vanessa has always enjoyed keeping Robert on edge. And Eliza? Does she know any of this? Grandmother hesitated. I believe Vanessa told her some version of the story when Eliza was a teenager. I overheard them arguing once, and Eliza threw out something about Mom's history with Uncle Robert. Vanessa looked horrified that she knew. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. Eliza's strange resentment of me, her competitiveness, her constant need for family attention. It all stemmed from this buried history. So all this outrage about me dating Ryan is completely hypocritical, I said, anger building again. Dad nearly destroyed his marriage by emotionally cheating with his brother's girlfriend, but I'm the family traitor for dating my step-cousin's ex-fiancé after they broke up. The loudest moral outrage often comes from those with the most to hide, Grandmother observed. Your father sees in you the same weakness he fought in himself, choosing personal desire over family loyalty. It frightens him. Did you know that Dad got my biggest client reassigned? That he's actively trying to derail my career? The injustice of it burned? Grandmother's eyebrows shot up. That I did not know. That goes beyond parental disappointment into vindictiveness. She studied me thoughtfully. What do you plan to do with this information, Savannah? It was the question I'd been asking myself since finding the letters. Part of me wanted to explode this family secret at the next dinner, to watch their self-righteous anger crumble under the weight of their own hypocrisy. But another part recognized the destructive power of such a revelation. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I'm tired of being villainized for something that pales in comparison to what they've hidden for years. Before you decide, my grandmother said, reaching for my hand, ask yourself what outcome you truly want. Revenge might feel satisfying in the moment, but it rarely brings peace. She squeezed my fingers. That said, some truths need to see daylight before healing can begin. I left my grandmother's house with a mix of emotions: vindication, anger, confusion, and oddly hope. The family dynamics I'd accepted as fixed reality were actually built on shifting sands of secrets and unspoken histories, which meant they could be rebuilt into something more honest, more equitable. Back at Ryan's apartment, I shared everything I'd learned. His reaction mirrored my own initial shock. So your dad nearly had an affair with your aunt, and now he's punishing you for dating me. Ryan paced the living room. That's beyond hypocritical. That's psychological projection at its finest. And Eliza probably knew this whole time, I added. It explains why she's always been so competitive with me, why she's always played the victim with the family. She's been wielding this secret knowledge like a weapon. What are you going to do? Ryan asked, the same question my grandmother had posed. I took a deep breath. I'm going to confront them. All of them. Not out of revenge, but because this family can't heal until the truth is acknowledged. Ryan looked concerned. Are you sure? This could blow up the entire family dynamic. The family dynamic is already toxic, I replied, with newfound clarity. It's built on lies, favoritism, and emotional manipulation. Maybe it needs to be blown up before something healthier can take its place. Over the next week, I methodically gathered evidence. Beyond the letters, I found old photographs showing my father and Vanessa together in college, their body language revealing an intimacy that couldn't be denied. My grandmother provided dates and details that corresponded with family events where tensions had run high. I even discovered financial records showing my father had bought an expensive bracelet from Tiffany's during the period of their emotional reconnection, a gift that matched one I'd seen Aunt Vanessa wearing occasionally. Most damning of all was the email I found in my father's account when I logged in to forward myself some tax documents. Yes, I still knew his password. Savannah1995 hadn't changed in years. The email dated just 3 months ago was from my father to a colleague referencing the complicated family situation with my former fiancé now married to my brother and how maintaining appearances at family gatherings becomes more difficult each year. With each piece of evidence, my confidence grew. This wasn't about destroying my family out of spite. This was about forcing accountability, about refusing to be the scapegoat for their unresolved issues. This was about reclaiming my place, not as the perfect daughter, but as a person deserving of basic respect and honesty. The question that remained was when and how to confront them. The opportunity presented itself when my mother texted, the first direct communication since my exile, informing me that my cousin Michael was celebrating his law school graduation with a family dinner the following weekend. "Your presence would mean a lot to Michael," she wrote, a careful olive branch that made no mention of our ongoing conflict. I replied simply, "I'll be there." What my mother didn't know was that I wouldn't be coming alone. I would be bringing the truth, and it would change everything. The restaurant my uncle had chosen for Michael's graduation celebration was upscale even by Blackwood standards. Private dining room, white tablecloths, waitstaff, moving with practiced invisibility. I arrived 15 minutes late, a calculated decision to ensure everyone would already be seated, conversations flowing, drinks in hand. I wanted witnesses. Ryan had offered to come with me, but I declined. "This is something I need to do alone," I told him. "These are family wounds that need family healing or family cauterizing." The conversation stopped abruptly when I entered the room. 8 pairs of eyes turned toward me, expressions ranging from Michael's genuine pleasure to my father's frozen shock to Eliza's immediate narrowing of eyes. Savannah, my mother, recovered first, standing halfway. "We weren't sure you'd come." "I said I would," I replied evenly. "Congratulations, Michael. Harvard Law is quite an achievement." My cousin grinned, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "Thanks, Dad's already got me interviewing at his firm next week." "Of course he does," I said with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "The Blackwood family takes care of its own." Usually, I took the only empty seat directly across from my father and beside Eliza, the worst possible placement, surely by design. A waiter appeared at my elbow to pour wine, and I thanked him with more warmth than necessary, delaying the inevitable confrontation by a few precious seconds. My father cleared his throat. "We were just discussing Michael's plans for the bar exam." "Fascinating," I said, taking a sip of wine. "Though I'm more interested in discussing something else tonight." I set down my glass with deliberate calm. Like why I was disowned for dating Ryan, while Dad's emotional affair with Aunt Vanessa has been swept under the rug for 20 years. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's face drained of color. Uncle Thomas looked between my father and his wife in confusion. Aunt Vanessa's hand froze halfway to her water glass. Eliza's expression was the most revealing, not shock but alarm, confirming my suspicion that she'd known. Savannah, my father's voice, was low dangerous. "This is neither the time nor the place." "When would be the right time, Dad?" I interrupted. "When you've finished destroying my career. When I've been thoroughly excised from the family for a betrayal that doesn't come close to what you did." "What is she talking about?" Robert Uncle Thomas asked, confusion giving way to suspicion. I reached into my purse and removed a folder containing copies of the letters, photographs, and emails I'd collected. I found grandmother's letters while clearing out my room. She confirmed everything when I asked her. My father's face had gone from pale to flushed with anger. You had no right to go through my personal correspondence, and you had no right to contact the Wilson Group and get me removed from their case, I countered. You had no right to interfere with my partnership track. You had no right to disown me for dating someone who was never actually part of this family, while you nearly destroyed your own marriage by pursuing your brother's wife. Is this true? My mother's voice was barely audible. I couldn't tell if her question was directed at me or my father. Catherine, my father began reaching for her hand. She pulled away. Not Savannah. You. Is what she's saying true? About you and Vanessa? Aunt Vanessa jumped in her voice, artificially light. This is ancient history, Catherine. Nothing worth disrupting Michael's celebration over. So it is true, Uncle Thomas said flatly. He looked at his wife with new eyes. You were engaged to my brother before me, and you reconnected with him while married to me. The carefully constructed facade was cracking. Years of buried tensions and unspoken resentments were bubbling to the surface, faces revealing emotions long suppressed under the guise of perfect family harmony. It was an emotional indiscretion, nothing more, my father admitted, finally, his authority diminishing with each word. Over 20 years ago, we moved past it. All of us. Did we, my mother asked quietly, or did we just agree never to speak of it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like that unresolved situation has poisoned this family for decades. I turned to Eliza, whose expression had transformed from alarm to calculated neutrality. You knew, didn't you? That's why you've always resented me. That's why you've always positioned yourself as the victim, why you've manipulated family situations to your advantage. Don't be ridiculous, she snapped, but the flush creeping up her neck betrayed her. Your mother told you I pressed. Grandmother overheard you two arguing about it years ago. Eliza's eyes widened at the mention of my grandmother. Eleanor needs to mind her own business, she muttered, effectively confirming my accusation. So let me understand this. I continued addressing the entire table now. I was kicked out of my home, ostracized from the family, and had my career sabotaged because I dated Ryan, someone Eliza had already broken up with because she cheated on him. Meanwhile, the people leading this moral crusade have been hiding their own relationship indiscretions that actually did threaten to break up a marriage and divide the family. It's not the same thing my father insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. You're right, I agreed. It's not. What you did was objectively worse. The only difference is that you had the power in this family, so you got to decide which sins were forgivable and which weren't. Just then, the restaurant door opened, and my grandmother walked in, leaning slightly on her cane, but otherwise projecting her usual regal bearing. Grandmother Michael looked confused. I thought you couldn't come because of your bridge club. Bridge can wait, she said, making her way to an empty chair a waiter hastily pulled out for her. I received a call from Savannah earlier today. She surveyed the table, taking in the tense faces. I see the truth has finally come out. Mother, this isn't your concern, my father began. Isn't it? She countered. I've watched this family fracture along fault lines of secrets and favoritism for years. I've watched you treat Savannah with impossible standards while making endless excuses for Eliza. I've watched Catherine pretend not to notice the lingering glances between you and Vanessa at family gatherings. I've watched Thomas doubt himself without knowing why. She settled her gaze on me. And now I've watched you punish your daughter for a relationship that pales in comparison to your own indiscretions. The silence that followed was broken by my mother's quiet sobs. Uncle Thomas stood abruptly, throwing his napkin on the table. I need some air. Aunt Vanessa moved to follow him, but he held up a hand. Not now, Vanessa. Not right now. As he left, the remaining family members sat in uncomfortable silence. The carefully maintained illusion of perfect family harmony shattered beyond repair. I didn't come here tonight to destroy the family, I said, finally, my voice gentler. I came because I refuse to be the scapegoat for unresolved issues that predate me. I came because I believe we can only heal once we acknowledge the truth. By ambushing everyone at a celebration dinner, Eliza challenged finding her voice again. That doesn't seem like healing to me. When would you have suggested, Eliza, at one of the family dinners I'm no longer invited to? Through the group text I've been removed from, I shook my head. I took the only opportunity available to me. My father stood his authority visibly diminished. I think we should continue this discussion another time. In private. That's your solution to everything, isn't it, Dad? I responded. Keep everything private, maintain appearances, sweep the uncomfortable truths under the rug until they fester into something toxic. Savannah, my mother interjected, her voice steadier now. While your father's reaction to your relationship with Ryan was excessive, your approach tonight has been equally hurtful. I felt a flicker of doubt. Had I gone too far? Was I no better than they were wielding truth as a weapon when it served my purpose? My grandmother reached across the table, taking my hand. Sometimes the bone must be re-broken to heal properly, Catherine, she said to my mother. This family has been functioning on broken bones for too long. Michael, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke. I don't understand why any of this matters so much. Who cares who dated whom? We're family. His innocent comment, devoid of the decades of context, hit me with unexpected force. He was right, in a way. The details of who betrayed whom mattered less than how we treated each other afterward. The true dysfunction in our family wasn't about specific relationships, but about the uneven application of forgiveness, the conditional nature of acceptance, the enforcement of loyalty that flowed only upward, never downward. You're right, Michael, I said softly. We are family, which is why I hope that after tonight we can start being honest with each other. No more perfect facades hiding ugly truths. No more different rules for different people. I stood gathering my purse and the folder of evidence I'd brought. I didn't come here seeking revenge or to destroy relationships. I came because I deserve the same grace and understanding that has been extended to others in this family. I came because I refuse to be defined by your disappointment in me for finding happiness with Ryan. As I turned to leave, my mother called out, Savannah, wait. I paused, looking back at her. Are you happy with him? With Ryan, she asked a genuine question beneath the tears and confusion. Yes, I answered simply, I am. He sees me for who I am, not for who anyone expects me to be. Something shifted in her expression. A recognition perhaps of what she'd lost in her blind support of my father's edict. Then I'd like to meet him, she said quietly. Properly this time. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was an opening, a crack in the wall of family rejection. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air, feeling both lighter and heavier than when I'd entered. Burdened with the weight of what I'd done, but freed from the weight of what had been done to me. 6 months after the confrontation at Michael's graduation dinner, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror applying the final touches to my makeup. Through the open door, I could hear Ryan chatting with my mother in the living room of our new apartment, their conversation punctuated by occasional laughter. He's good with her, my grandmother observed, from where she sat on the edge of the bathtub, watching me with approval. Better than I expected. He's good with everyone, I replied, smiling at her reflection. It's what drew me to him in the first place, his genuine interest in people beyond their usefulness to him. A quality sadly lacking in many Blackwoods, she said dryly. Are you nervous about tonight? I considered the question as I applied lipstick. Not nervous, cautiously optimistic. Tonight would be the first full family dinner since the confrontation, Thanksgiving at my parents' house. The intervening months had been a slow, often painful process of rebuilding relationships on more honest foundations. My mother had been the first to reach out, meeting Ryan and me for coffee 2 weeks after the restaurant scene. My father took longer, his pride warring with his love for me, but eventually a stiff lunch meeting led to occasional phone calls and finally an awkward but sincere apology. "I projected my own guilt onto your situation," he admitted during one of our conversations. "I couldn't forgive myself for what happened with Vanessa, so I couldn't forgive you for something that reminded me of my failure." Uncle Thomas and Aunt Vanessa had separated briefly, their marriage shaken by the public exposure of old wounds. They were in counseling now, rebuilding on shakier but more authentic ground. They would both be at dinner tonight, arriving separately, but committed to civil interaction. The biggest change had been with Eliza. After weeks of pointed social media posts alluding to family betrayals, she'd finally agreed to meet me for lunch at my grandmother's insistence. The conversation had been tense but ultimately revelatory. "My mother always made it seem like your father chose your mother over her," Eliza explained, stirring her iced tea morosely. "Like we were the backup family, the second choice. She'd point out how your dad gave you everything while my dad struggled to match it. It felt like we were always competing with the real Blackwoods." I never knew that I'd said genuinely surprised. I always thought you had the freedom I never did, to make mistakes, to explore different paths, to be imperfect. We'd looked at each other with new understanding, recognizing how we'd both been manipulated by the older generation's unresolved issues. We weren't close friends now, probably never would be, but the toxic competition had dissolved into something resembling mutual respect. My career had recovered and even flourished. After the Wilson case debacle, I'd received an unexpected call from a boutique law firm specializing in corporate ethics cases. A partner there had witnessed my courtroom skills before the reassignment and been impressed. The new position came with better hours, more meaningful work, and partners who valued me for my abilities rather than my family connections. Ready Ryan appeared in the bathroom doorway, handsome in a navy sweater I'd given him for his birthday. "Your mom's been showing me your kindergarten photos," I groaned. Already with the embarrassing childhood memories, "I think it's her way of saying I'm officially accepted," he said with a smile. "And your dad texted to ask if we wanted to stop for wine on the way." Another peace offering. My father was trying in his way. As we drove to my parents' house, Ryan reached over to squeeze my hand. "Proud of you, you know. Standing up to your family, rebuilding these relationships on your terms. Not everyone could have done that." I had help, I acknowledged, thinking of his unwavering support, my grandmother's wisdom, even the few loyal friends who'd stood by me during the worst of the family exile. And honestly, I'm not sure I had much choice. Living with that level of hypocrisy and conditional acceptance was slowly killing something essential in me. The house looked the same as it always had, imposing colonial, perfectly maintained lawn, even in late November, warm lights glowing from within. Yet I felt different approaching it now, not the perfect daughter returning to her rightful place, but a woman choosing to engage with her flawed family on equal footing. My father opened the door before we could ring the bell. "You're here," he said awkwardly, patting my shoulder before extending his hand to Ryan. "Traffic wasn't too bad, not bad at all," Ryan replied, easily handing over the wine we'd brought. Inside, the familiar sense of Thanksgiving, roasting turkey sage stuffing my mother's famous apple pie, mingled with the undercurrent of tension that still lingered whenever the family gathered. Uncle Thomas was helping Michael set the table. Aunt Vanessa was in the kitchen with my mother, their conversations stilted but civil. Grandmother sat in her usual armchair, observing everything with sharp eyes. Eliza hadn't arrived yet. Savannah, my mother, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "You look wonderful. That new firm must be treating you well." "It is," I confirmed. "I'm actually leading a class action suit against HealthCorps next month." "I read about that case in the Times," Uncle Thomas commented. "Impressive work." The simple acknowledgement of my professional accomplishments, without reference to my father's connections or the family name, felt like a small but significant victory. Dinner was a careful dance of new boundaries and old traditions. We avoided certain topics by unspoken agreement. The past infidelity, the months of estrangement, focusing instead on neutral ground. Michael's new position at the firm, my mother's garden club presidency, Ryan's recent neutral ground op, architectural award. When Eliza finally arrived fashionably late as usual, she brought a date. A literature professor from Northeastern with kind eyes and a quick wit. The Eliza of 6 months ago would have used him as a prop for attention. This Eliza genuinely listened when he spoke and didn't try to dominate every conversation. "I'm starting therapy next week," she told me quietly as we cleared plates between dinner and dessert. Turns out, being the emotional one in the family was just another role I was playing without questioning why. "Good for you," I said sincerely. "It helped me tremendously." As we gathered around the table for dessert, my father clinked his glass for attention. I tensed, uncertain what he might say. "I'd like to propose a toast." He began looking suddenly older and more vulnerable than I could remember seeing him. To family, not the perfect image we pretend to be, but the messy, complicated people we actually are, and to second chances. His eyes met mine briefly before continuing. "I've learned some difficult lessons this year about the damage that secrets can cause and about the courage it takes to speak truth, even when it's painful to hear. I'm grateful that we're all here tonight, working towards something more authentic than what we had before." I felt tears prick my eyes at his unexpected candor. Ryan squeezed my hand under the table as my father raised his glass. To truth and healing, we echoed the simple words carrying the weight of months of difficult conversations, painful revelations, and gradual reconciliations. Later, as guests began to leave, my mother pulled me aside. "I have something for you," she said, leading me to my father's study. From his desk drawer, she retrieved a small velvet box. "This was my grandmother's," she explained, opening it to reveal a delicate sapphire ring. "I always planned to give it to you someday. I think now is the right time. Mom, it's beautiful, but it's not a bribe for forgiveness," she assured me, reading my hesitation. "It's an acknowledgement that you're building your own life, making your own choices. Good ones, from what I can see." She glanced toward the living room where Ryan was deep in conversation with Michael. "And it's an apology for forgetting that my first loyalty should have been to supporting you, not blindly following your father's decree." I accepted the box, emotion tightening my throat. "Thank you." "Are you happy, Savannah?" "Truly," she asked, echoing her question from that night at the restaurant. "I am," I answered, more certain than ever. "Not because everything is perfect. It's not. But because I'm living authentically now. No more perfect daughter act, no more walking on eggshells, no more accepting different standards for different people in this family." She nodded, a hint of sadness in her smile. "I wish it hadn't taken such dramatics to get here, but I'm glad we didn't lose you in the process." As Ryan and I drove home that night, I reflected on the long, painful journey from that fateful family dinner 6 months ago to tonight's cautious but genuine gathering. "What are you thinking?" Ryan asked, glancing over at me. "That family is complicated," I replied. "And that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in a dynamic that's harmful, even if it means risking relationships in the short term." "Your father's toast was surprising," Ryan observed. "Seemed sincere." It was I agreed. "He's changed. We all have." I looked out at the familiar streets passing by the neighborhood I'd grown up in, now holding both painful and healing memories. I used to think family loyalty meant accepting whatever was handed to you. The expectations, the double standards, the facades we were all supposed to maintain. Now I understand that true loyalty sometimes means challenging the status quo, speaking uncomfortable truths, demanding better from the people who claim to love you. Ryan pulled into the parking space at our apartment building and turned to face me. So, was it worth it? All the pain and drama to get to this point, I thought about my father's newfound humility, my mother's quiet strength as she redefined her role in the marriage, Eliza's steps towards self-awareness, and my own liberation from the golden child pedestal I'd been trapped on for years. Yes, I said finally, it was worth it. Not for revenge or to prove I was right, but because now there's a chance for something real to grow from the ashes of what we pretended to be. As we walked hand in hand toward our apartment building, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for most of my adult life. The Blackwood family would never be perfect. No family is. But we were learning to be authentic, to extend grace in all directions, to allow each other the space to be fully human, flaws and all. And in that messy, complicated reality, I had finally found my true place. Thank you so much for joining me on this family journey from betrayal to healing. I'd love to know, have you ever had to stand up to family injustice or hypocrisy? How did it change your relationships? Drop your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories with unexpected twists. Don't forget to share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes facing family karma head-on is the path to genuine healing. Until next time, remember that authentic relationships are worth fighting for, even when it means challenging the status quo. Thanks for watching.